Okay. Good evening, everyone. Myself, Priyanka Jaiswal, a second year student at Institute of Law, Nirma University, and I'll be your moderator for the webinar tonight. Today, we all have gathered here to witness a panel discussion on Farmers' Bill organized by Think India Gujarat. Think India has emerged as a vibrant platform for inculcating knowledge, ideation, and innovation among the stakeholders for nation building. It brings on board academia, researchers, students, and innovators for, for a meaningful collaboration. Since inception of Think India as an organization, it has been able to connect to a large number of students and researchers in a very short span of time. The vision and mission of Think India is to promote social harmony, fulfill the environmental, cultural, and security needs of Bharat and the world as well. To support and motivate the initiatives of organizations and individuals, initiate and encourage India-centric thoughts and activities, upliftment of rural Bharat, promote gender equality and justice, and to create an ecosystem for the youth organization and individuals who are working in the interest of nation. And to achieve that, the organization has recently come up with 25 distinct forums, such as criminal justice, constitutional law, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, international law, language, and ancient mathematics forum, are to name a few. Moving further, to have the discussion on Farmers' Bill, we have in our panel Mr. Ajay Kashyap. He is a graduate of Gujarat National Law University. He is a policy researcher based out of New Delhi who has worked on projects with UK India Business Council, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, and various policy think tanks. Next, we have amongst us Advocate Shaunak Kotekar. He is currently practicing in Bombay High Court. He has been a PRS LAMP Fellow for year 2017-18 and is an alumni of Institute of Law, Nirma University. We also have amongst us Sri Ganesh Turerao. He is National in charge of Think India. We welcome you, sir. Before we move further, I would request everyone to please mute their mics while the session is going on and kindly post your queries in the chat box with the name of the speaker whom you want to address your question. I repeat, post your questions in the chat box along with the name of speaker whom you want to address your question. Now, I would like to call upon Mr. Ajay Kashyap to share his views and opinion on the Farmers' Bill with us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Priyanka. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Namaste, everyone. Firstly, I would like to begin by expressing my heartfelt gratitude to Sri Anshul Gautamji, convener Think India Gujarat, for having me here. My journey with Think India began 7 years ago in 2013 when I was in college, and whatever I am today, a large part of it goes to the extraordinary efforts that my seniors like Sri Ganeshji Turerao have put into making the person I am. So thank you, Ganeshji and Anshulji, for having me here today. Thank you, and all the best to Think India Gujarat. Now, coming to the topic, I'm sure most of you must have read about the issue in the recent past, the provisions of the Act. I've been told that most of the people here are law students. You must have also heard about the protests and the politics behind it. And today I'll try my best, hopefully, to explain these farm reforms and how the agriculture sector is bound to change for the good in the days to come. We all know that India is amongst the fastest growing countries in the world, which reflects an ambitious reform agenda undertaken by the government of India ever since 2014. And against this backdrop, agriculture is a key sector in terms of its contribution to both employment and the GDP. Due to improved access to fertilizers and seeds, as well as better irrigation and credit coverage, production has been increasing. 3. challenges remain. Among them is the prevalence of a large number of smallholders, climate change, pressure on natural resources such as water, persistent food insecurity, and an underdeveloped food processing and retail sector. And perhaps these challenges are at times amplified due to the complex system of institutions that are involved in the implementation of agriculture policies in our country. Now, we know that states have constitutional responsibility for many aspects of agriculture, but it is also important for us to remember that the central government plays an important role by developing national approaches to policy and providing the necessary funds for implementation of these policies at a state level. Despite this, restrictions stemming from both the ECA and the APMC Acts deterred private sector investments in marketing infrastructure. And the biggest problem that I found in the previous system was that differences amongst the states in their status of their respective APMC acts and how these acts were implemented added to the uncertainties in supply chains and drove up transportation costs. And therefore, the time was right for the central government to bring in these much needed reforms. There was a dire need to end the monopoly of a few, an urgent cry to eliminate the middlemen, and ensure that farmers have the right to sell their produce at a place and price of their liking. And that is what the reforms will achieve in the days to come. Now we come to the reforms. We know that in September, the Parliament of India passed two crucial bills: the Farmers and Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Bill 2020 and the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill 2020. These were later given assent to by the President of India. Coming to the first bill, that is the which is now an ordinance, the Farmers and Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Ordinance 2020. This gives India's farmer the much needed economic freedom to sell his produce anywhere at whatever price, which is in contrast with the APMC market-based system, which had monopolized agricultural trade and resulted in an extractive system that had impoverished the farmers of our country. And regarding this, Dr. Ashok Gulati, whoever here follows agriculture might know that Dr. Ashok Gulati is the foremost agriculture economist of our country. He said that this will liberalize agricultural trade and can be considered as a 1991 moment for India's agriculture. Now, coming from Dr. Gulati, this is a big thing. This is an endorsement of the reforms. It is here that people have an issue with regards to the minimum support price, the MSP, and the government procurement. To address this, none other than the Prime Minister himself has said that the process of government procurement will continue. There's no question about that. It shall continue. However, private markets without a mandi tax will emerge, which will end up fostering greater price discovery for our farmers. Now, what will this do? This will essentially end up benefiting both the farmers and the consumers, as it will create a leaner food supply chain and eliminate the extractive set of middlemen. Through this, the distorted and monopolized supply chains will finally be a thing of the past, helping our farmers immensely in the days to come. Many people have raised concerns about price discovery for the farmers. However, what we fail to realize is that in almost every other sector, there are deregulated markets, and yet producers find a way to sell their goods and services at a suitable price and make a living for themselves. The other thing that this act aims to achieve is that there would be a barrier-free movement of farm produce, interstate and also intrastate. This will have a tremendous impact on reducing transportation and marketing costs, thereby helping our farmers to earn more. Now we come to the second aspect, that is the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Ordinance 2020. Now, among other things, the Act allows for contract farming. What a formal contract farming agreement does is that this agreement with the producers ensures a fixed return on their produce. This is a kind of a forward contract, right? And law students, you would know this. This is a kind of a forward contract which will give farmers assured returns and reduce any price-related uncertainty, thereby allowing them to better plan their resources. With this, our farmers can enter into a contract with agribusiness firms, processors, retailers, or even exporters for the sale of future farming produce at a pre-decided price. I mean, if you are to look at this with an open, rational mind, you'd find this to be a landmark change in the existing setup. In my introductory statements, I mentioned about small landholdings in India. The statistics are, however, whopping. Close to 86% of the farmers in India are those with small or marginal landholdings. These farmers with less than 5 hectares will gain tremendously due to aggregation and contract. The dividends that this will give to individual farmers, the agriculture sector, and the economy as a whole is something that we cannot even fathom at this point of time. And in any untoward incident, a market unpredictability, the risk now transfers to the sponsors and not the farmers. This is perhaps the finest part of the reform, right? We're saving the farmers from any unpredictability, any untoward incident. Through the sponsors, our farmers will be able to have better technology and even inputs to increase the yield and the quality of the. We'll see how the farmers save marketing costs and thereby make more money. Intermediaries will be eliminated, which will help in price realization naturally. Another important feature here that many people have missed discussion is that there is a mechanism for dispute resolution, which works in the favor of our farmers because there is a redressal timing. Okay, you go to the SDA and then you go to the additional collector and then the collector, and this process has to be done one in the first time frame, that is 30 days, and the other, that is the next 30 days. So this essentially helps the small farmers a lot. uh, Now we come to the final aspect of our reform, which is the Essential Commodities Act. This was approved as an audience by the cabinet in June this year and later by the President of India. The question people often ask with regards to this is that what was the need for the change in ECA? This act was legislated in 1955 at a time when our country was facing severe scarcity of food due to abysmal level of food grain production. You would be surprised to know that India imported wheat from countries like the United States to feed our population. Something as basic as wheat was being imported, and this should give us an idea as to the gravity of the situation that existed before and how far India has come in the last 4 to 5 decades. Hence, in order to stop black marketing, to stop hoarding of foodstuffs, the ECA had to be amended. And I'm surprised as to why this didn't happen earlier. This should have happened much earlier, right? I mean, to give you a few statistics as to how far we've come, a note prepared by the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution shows that production of wheat has increased by 10 times from less than 10 million tons in 1955-56 to more than 100 million tons in 2018-19. During the same period, the production of rice has increased more than 4 times, from about 25 million tons to 110 million tons. The production of pulses, for that matter, has increased 2.5 times, from 10 million tons to 25 million tons. In fact, India has now become an exporter of several agricultural products, and with these developments, the EC Act had become, redundant. There was a need to change this act. Now, this amendment removes commodities like cereals, pulses, oilseeds, edible oils, onions, and potato from the list of regulated essential commodities. What this will do is attract private investment in the value chain of these commodities. This will bring in investment to farm infrastructure like cold storages, modernizing the food supply chain. This will also help farmers and consumers by bringing price stability, right? And create a competitive market environment and cut wastage of farm produce. Hence, we can see that these are far reaching reforms being brought by the government of India for one purpose and one purpose only. And that is the overall development of the agriculture sector and increase the income of our farmers, thereby giving them a better quality of life. Now, the question that a lot of people have asked is if the reforms are landmark and cater to the farmers for their overall benefit, why protest, right? And the answer lies in the hypocrisy. You'd be surprised to know that these changes that have been brought by the Modi government are exactly same changes which were promised by the Indian National Congress in its manifesto before the 2019 elections and the Punjab Congress manifesto in 2017 elections. In the 19 elections, in the manifesto point number 11, they say that the Congress will repeal the Agricultural Produce Market Committees Act and make trade in agricultural produce, including exports and interstate trade, free from all restrictions. And they say the similar thing about the Essential Commodities Act as well. The Punjab Congress manifesto in 2017 promised something similar. You may have also noticed a few spokespersons from other parties like the Aam Aadmi Party speak about reforms. But just to quote something, about 10 days ago, on the 23rd of November 2020, the Delhi government itself notified one of these laws, the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Ordinance 2020. And this must be a question that any concerned Indian must ask, whether these protests are motivated and being carried out only for the sake of protesting, or do these parties have the best interests of farmers in their hearts? But these reforms cannot be looked in isolation. They have to be looked as to the performance of the government ever since 2014. To name a few, the PM Kisan Samman Nidhi has total beneficiaries to the tune of about 10 crores, 9.97 crores to be precise. The Fasal Bima Yojana has total farmers insured to the tune of 575.6 lakhs. Over 22 crore soil health cards have been dispatched to farmers as of the 1st of December 2020. The soil testing labs stand at 7,949, right? You look at the funds for dairy farming and animal husbandry, that has increased many folds. You've got to look at the MSP as well. If you look at the MSP, I have some statistics from the UPA era, that is 2013-14, and if you are to compare them with the NDA era in 2020-21, the MSP of wheat has increased by 41%, paddy by 43%, masoor by 73%, urad by 40%, moong 60%, arhad 40%, mustard 52%, gram 65%, and groundnut 32%. So these reforms cannot be looked in isolation. They have to be looked as to the performance of the government in this sector over the past 5-6 years. Now, to conclude, I would say that having looked at all these factors, the background, and the explanation to the reforms in the agriculture sector, it is imperative that bright young minds like all of you here today take the message to the masses and impress upon them the benefits of these reforms and why it was the need of the hour. We must not allow people with selfish political interests to dictate terms to our farmers, who are our lifeline and our annadatta. With this, I once again thank Anshul Gautamji and his team for the opportunity to speak with all of you today. Thank you. Thank you. Priyanka?
Thank you, sir. It was, am I audible?
You're audible. You're audible, yeah.
Thank you, sir. It was indeed very informative. And people have posted their questions in the chat box. I would like to inform them that the questions will be addressed at the end of the session. So they may pose their questions here. Thank you, Ajay, sir. Moving ahead, I would like to call upon Mr. Shaunak Kotekar to express his opinion on the bill.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, am I audible, right?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
So, first of all, a very warm greetings to all the participants, and to Think India. I thank you for inviting me. I think Ajay has done a wonderful job explaining you what these bills are all about, the benefits, and he has also addressed some of the misconceptions with regards to these bills. So, in fact, he's made my job quite easier. So rather than getting into the details of the bills, I will straight away come to the policy aspect of it, and I'll explain to you as to why these bills were needed in current era of agriculture. So before we get into all the three bills, let us understand what this APMC system was all about. So around 1960s, the states had brought in these APMC laws, and these APMC laws were initially brought in order to protect the farmers from unfair trade practices. And what these laws basically meant was that the commodities that are notified in the APMC laws will be traded only through the state designated mandis. So whichever commodity, and it was practically all the commodities were added to the APMC Act. So whatever commodity is mentioned in the APMC can only be traded through the APMC Act. The trader has to pay a certain amount of tax, which will be used to fund the APMC infrastructure, and the farmer will also have to register himself, provide a certain amount of tax, and pay commission to the middleman. So this is what the system was all about. Now, over the years, there were several problems that arose out of the system. And one of the main issues with the system was that traders over the years created a cartel of sorts. So basically, if you look at the APMC market committees and their management systems, you will see that the management is controlled by the traders, uh, the commission agents, and the rich landowners and the local politicians. So all of them in collusion with each other have had basically created a cartel of sorts. And because of this nexus, what they did was that they delayed the new licenses that had to be provided to the traders. So there was a complete lack of competition. The price discovery, which was one of the main jobs of the APMC, which happens through auction, had become a complete sham. The auctions were not taking place in the fair manner that like it should have, and the as a result of it, the farmer ended up getting only 15 to 17% of the amount that we pay to buy the commodity, which is the end price of the product. The second issue with the APMC system was that somehow states figured out that it can be an effective method of revenue generation for the states. But APMC cess was never meant to be a revenue source. APMC cess was only meant to fund the APMC infrastructure and provide facilities to the farmer, and not a general revenue surplus to the states. So this was one of the big issues with the APMC. Initially, the cess on the commodities was around 0.5% to 1%, and over the years, the APMCs increased the commodity cess to 8%, 10%. What they realized was that since this money is not shown in the state budget and it remains in the bank account of the Mandi board, it can be used for discretionary spending. And this realization led to a lot of vested interest enter into the APMC system, and that is how the corruption seeped in. So, for example, Food Corporation of India is one of the biggest buyers of food grains in India, and it has to pay around 8% tax to the Punjab APMCs for the food grains that it is procuring. Now, the same amount of money could have been used for capital investment in the farm sector, which is being paid to the APMCs who are not even using it to better their infrastructure, and all that money is going into the pockets of the APMC market, of the members of the APMC market, who in collusion with the local politicians, landowners, are exploiting farmers. So these were basically the issues with the APMC system. There was another issue. Since there are different APMC laws in different states, it creates a fragmented market. Now there's a basic concept in the economy that a fragmented market is virtually a trade barrier. Now, if you unify the market, and several reports have pointed out that if there is a single market across the country, the trade will increase by around 11%. So, that's why the law with regard to the trade and facilitation is brought about. What this law does is that it allows the buyers to buy directly from the farmers. The farmers no more have to go to the mandi system to sell their product, and excuse me. So what it does is that it creates competition in the system. And if there is competition to APMCs, for example, then APMCs will have to mend their ways. Now, there are concerns being raised as to whether this will lead to the deterioration and the virtual vanishing of the APMC system. My answer to that is that that is less likely to happen. What is more likely to happen is that the APMCs will reform themselves to the competition that is posed by the private players. The farmers are going to benefit because they will not have to pay transport fees or commission fees to the agents. The traders will also be benefited because they no more have to pay the cess to the APMCs, and therefore the overall price of the product is also going to decrease. So it is beneficial both for the consumer and the farmer and also the trader. Now, the second amendment was brought to the ECA Act, and Ajay has already told you as to how the ECA Act was meant for the for a regime in which we had a food when we had a food scarcity. And you look at all the data currently, India is a food surplus country. So actually, we do not need those strict regulations as far as stock limits and trading are concerned. So let me give you one interesting data. In 2019 alone, there were 76,000 raids which were conducted by the bureaucrats, and when these matters were taken to the court of law, only 2 to 4% of the people of the traders were convicted. So ECA was essentially used as an instrument of as an instrument to exploit the traders. It gave too much power to the bureaucrats, and it hugely disincentivized any sort of investment in the cold storage infrastructure. It also disincentivized trade, and therefore doing away with all these uh, impositions is going to help the farming infrastructure. Ajay has already told you about the farmer contracts bill, which facilitate a contract between the farmer and the trader. Now, it isn't the case that trade did not take contracts did not take place between the farmer and the trader before, but right now it has been given a legal backing. There is a legal infrastructure, and there are some rules which have to be followed by the traders when they enter into a contract with the farmers. And I don't think I need to spend more time discussing the law which facilitates contract, because I think Ajay has dealt that quite effectively. Now, a combination of these three laws is going to help the farmers. Uh, is going to help the farmers, and I'll just give you an example as to how it will happen. Suppose I'm a farmer in Nagpur who produces wheat, and wheat, as you all know, is not a cash crop. It does not give me a lot of it does not give me a lot of output in terms of costs. And therefore, if I have to shift to, let's say, mango production, then I will have to do some sort of initial investment, and that is a barrier for most of the farmers to shift from grains to the cash crops, because they do not have the money to invest on the initial investment. Now, what happens because of the facilitation of contract between the trader and the farmer, is that the trader and the farmer can enter into a contract. The trader can guarantee me initial investment, and I can guarantee him mangoes in return. And the trader now, since he does not have any restrictions that are imposed by ECA or APMC, can freely trade trade the commodity, and either sell it directly to the consumer or sell it to some other company, and this can happen across India. So this is how these laws are going to benefit the farmers in totality. Now, there is a concern that how a small farmer is going with regards to the vulnerability which a small farmer will have when he enters into a contract with a big trader or a corporation, and whether the corporation will want to enter into a deal with a small farmer is also a question in matter. So therefore, what the government has also done is that it has brought in something called as FPOs, which is Farmer Producer Organization. So Farmer Producer Organization is basically collective farming. Maharashtra, when in 2016, in 2016, fruits and vegetables were denotified from the APMC Act, and subsequently farmer producer organizations were created. So around 400 farmer producer organizations were created, which had an annual revenue of around 2,800 crores. So all these all these amendments and new laws have to be seen in a larger context, and we have to understand as to what is the larger policy framework within which they are operating. And the government has already passed a policy which says that they will be creating around 10,000 farmer producer organizations across India. So these if you look in totality, this is how these changes are going to benefit the farmer. Now there is another concern with regards to MSP. There is a demand which is made primarily by the farmers from Punjab that either you legalize the MSP or we will not support these laws. Now, as Ajay has already pointed out, as far as the government is concerned, it has given a promise to the farmers that they will be procuring in future. The Food Corporation of India, which uh, which has to procure wheat and rice for the farmers for its food security obligation, will in any ways procure. But the thing that we need to understand is how this MSP system really works. Is it really benefiting the country as a whole, or is it even benefiting the farmers from Punjab? And let me give you a few statistics for that. So 90% of the wheat and rice that is produced in Punjab is procured by the Food Corporation of India. More than 90% of the wheat and rice that is produced in Haryana is also procured by the Food Corporation of India. Now, what happens is that the APMCs in Punjab and Haryana have imposed huge cess on the procurement of wheat and rice, and as a result of that, they get a revenue surplus. So Punjab, for example, gets 3,500 crores a year because of this system, and the the loss is of the FCI is on the FCI, which has to give this cess. So tomorrow, if the FCI has to buy directly from if the FCI buys directly from the farmers will still be getting the MSP, but the APMCs will not be getting that surplus revenue. So this is the fear that the government of Punjab has, and I think the negotiations that are taking place right now, uh, something that removes this something some action will be taken that removes this fear from the state government of Punjab. But the state government of Punjab also has to realize that in order to compete with the private players, they will also have to reduce their cess, and they will also have to provide better facilities both to the farmers and the producers. Now, uh, as I pointed out, this MSP and the FCI procurement system is heavily skewed to the benefit of the farmers from Punjab and Haryana. So, for example, UP, which is also one of the biggest producers of wheat and rice, only 10% of their produce is procured by the FCI, whereas the farmers from the UP or Bihar or states such as Chhattisgarh need more protection under MSPs than relatively richer farmers from Punjab and Haryana. What is also happening is because of this MSP, farmers in Punjab and Haryana are increasingly incentivized to produce wheat and rice, whereas lots of reports, committees have pointed out that the farmers from Punjab and Haryana should in fact be moving away from wheat and rice and moving towards producing crops that require less water. Now, there are lots of studies which have pointed out that if Punjab continues producing wheat and rice at the amount of which it does, then it will in 10 years or so, there will be no water available in Punjab, because the area of Punjab is a semi-arid area, and these crops require a lot of water. And this whole idea that your agricultural business model should be dependent on MSP is a flawed idea to begin with. Let's say tomorrow the government decides that instead of providing grains to the people under food security, let us provide them with cash coupons. If that decision is taken, then the farmers who are completely dependent on MSP system or completely dependent on FCI procurement will have to bear losses, and uh, and hence uh, uh, the fact that the government has promised that it will procure the wheat and rice from the farmers from Punjab on MSP. Even if that is guaranteed by the government, we also have to address this larger question as to whether this system is benefiting farmers from other parts of India or even the farmers from Punjab. Is it beneficial to the environment, and is it good economics to begin with? As far as FCI is concerned, it is procuring more than what is required. The last year itself, FCI procured around 800 million lakh tons of wheat and rice from all over the country, whereas its immediate and long-term requirement is only of around 400 crores. So there is this political pressure which is built by the rich farmers who are the chief beneficiaries of the MSP. Remember, only 6% of the farmers get benefit of the MSP and others are left out of the system. And all these rich farmers, landowners, then pressurize the government into buying more stuff than what is required. So this is as far as the MSP is concerned. As far as the three laws are concerned, and I will end by saying this, that if you think that these three bills in themselves are going to solve all the problems of the agriculture, then that wouldn't be a correct assumption. But they will definitely solve the problems that are linked to the agricultural market, and it will bring in a lot of productivity. It will bring in private investment, and it is going to give more money in the hands of the farmers. And I'll just give you a final example. Let's look at the condition of the milk producers in India today. So a typical milk producer gets 70% of the amount that is paid by the consumer to the on the final product. And as far as the milk sector is concerned, there is private investment, there are state-led cooperatives, or there are private cooperatives, and there is a fair competition in the market. And I think that should be the ideal example that we should be looking at when we are looking at the benefits that will accrue out of these three bills. So I'll end by that. Again, to the organizers, thanks a lot for inviting me. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to address them. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shaunak sir. It was indeed very enlightening and educational. Now we'll take up the questions. So, just a second. The first question that we have is from Amit Thakkar. The question is directed towards Ajay sir, and the question is: the Essential Commodities Amendment Bill 2020 facilitates the removal of certain commodities like onions, cereals, etc. Won't the recent decision on the export ban on onions make it difficult to implement the above act?
Thank you, Ami, for your question, but I don't think so. It's going to be any difficult. Firstly, what the act does is that it increases competition, right? By this, the cartel that was able to manipulate the prices will not be able to do so any further. And in the event of a stock holding, the government will invoke the FSA, and then they will do whatever is needed to ensure that there is no stock holding and manipulation of prices. And what we have to understand is that the government, through this reform, has perhaps ended the quintessential oligarchy that existed earlier. So to answer your question, no, I don't think so. It's going to be fine. Don't worry. It's going to be fine. It will serve its purpose for what it has been amended. Thank you.
Hope you got your answer, Ami. Now, next question is directed towards Shaunak sir, and the question is from Meghna. Why there is so much concern about MSP when it is applicable on 22 crops only, and nearly 80% of farmers don't even know about MSP properly according to 2016 data?
I think that is spot on. And the concern that the concern that is raised on the MSP is raised by the farmers who are the principal beneficiaries of it. And those are the rich farmers from Punjab. And as I've already pointed out, more than 90% of the wheat and rice that is produced in Punjab is procured by the Food Corporation of India. So basically, like, even for example, let's say the APMCs are deteriorated or vanished, the Food Corporation of India can still buy from the farmers directly on the MSP rates. On the top of that, the government has already promised that it will continue buying. But at the same time, whether we should continue with the MSP system or not is something that we have to look at, and that is something that I was talking about.
Okay, sir. The next question is from Karan Sharma. It's directed towards you, Ajay sir. The middleman and farmers share a deep relationship in rural society. The farmers can ask the middleman anytime in the middle of night and ask for money in an emergency. Will the corporates will be able to do that? Why do you think the middleman as an evil crook whose only job is to exploit farmers?
Okay, thank you for your question, Karan, but it doesn't work that way. I understand you're perhaps giving a example from your personal experience, or you must have heard it there. But what we have to keep in mind is that the sheer number of small landholders in India is 86%. Not all of them are lucky to have these good middlemen that we are discussing about, right? Um, the reason why the agriculture reforms were needed, the reason why the Swaminathan Commission had to be set up, was because there was exploitation by the middlemen. And we can't take a few stray examples to question the reforms or to say that a few middlemen are good, which I completely understand, and it is true that some of them share family relations. I just met a farmer who said that his relationship with a so-called middleman was that of an elder brother. And during his daughter's wedding, this elder brother middleman and gave him whatever he needed. So these examples are there, but we can't take one example and say that baki ke 80% logo ko chhod do. It doesn't work that way. You have to weigh the pros and cons and then perhaps work out the reforms. And that is what administration is all about. This is for the overall development of the sector, right? Not for the few people who got lucky with good middlemen. Thank you. Priyanka?
Yes, sir. Here's the next question for you. What about marginal farmers? It's private investments may tend to monopoly. We are not US. Our GDP is much less than them. What if there is a monopoly in the agricultural produce? The question is from Raghavendra.
Okay. To protect the marginal farmers. The second reform that we spoke about mentions, it has the name empowerment and protection in its very act. The farmers right? So the farmers, these marginal farmers who form 86% of the total population, will be empowered and protected, right? I gave you the example of contract farming, which essentially is for these kind of farmers. It eliminates the intermediaries or the middlemen, making them earn more. They have the freedom to sell more money, less transportation cost, more money. And hence, if we are to see, the question that perhaps somebody should be asking is, what about the middlemen and the large farmers? How will they earn now as much as they used to earn earlier? Because now we're going to see distribution of wealth, and we're going to see a transparent system. We're going to see an electronic distribution, and hence perhaps the question should be कि भाई कैसे अभी ये करप्शन तो पूरा रुक ही गया है मंडी में, तो ये क्या करेंगे ये लोग? प्रियंका.
Yeah, hope your question was answered, Raghavendra. Next question is for Shaunak sir, and the question is from Preksha Patel. Selling outside the APMC would remove the middlemen who used to increase the product price from an MSP to the end price to a great extent. Removal of middlemen will be beneficial for the consumers only as they will get the product at lower price. How is it beneficial for farmers?
So basically, when a farmer is selling to the APMC, since there are only few APMCs in a particular area, it is more likely that the farmer has to pay for the transportation cost. Secondly, the commission agents will charge a certain amount of fee for the for the services that they provide for facilitating trade between the farmer and the trader. And thirdly, the price discovery that takes place in the APMC currently is very disadvantageous to the farmer because it is more skewed in the benefit of the traders, since I've already mentioned how they have created a cartel of their own. And therefore, if the producer buys directly for the farmer, not only the producer benefits out of it, but also the farmer benefits out of it, because the producer will provide for the transportation. He will not have to go to the mandi, and since there will be more competition in the market, the uh, uh, price discovery by definition would be better and beneficial to the farmer. And I already gave you the example of the milk producers. The same system that we want to implement right now in the agricultural market is already there in the milk production system, and the milk farmer and the milk producer gets 70% of the amount of the end product. And also answering the previous question as to how would the state prevent monopolies. Now, there is always this saying that the invisible hand of the market also needs to be supplemented with the visible hand of the government. And I'm pretty sure that that government has laws that prevent monopolies right now. And since we are so concerned about the monopoly, hey, there was a state monopoly going on for so many years, and therefore the system was regressive. And now that we have private investment into the market, the state will typically see from a third person's viewpoint as to how these markets are reacting, and subsequently there will be regulations that will be brought in the sector. So if there is one single say a single private player who is creating a monopoly, there will be regulations brought in to address that, or address any of the other anomalies that are created through the new system. But first we need to bring in reforms, and then we need to bring in regulations. Yeah.
Next
Priyanka Chaudhary.
question. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Next question is for Ajay, sir. Kuldeep Sharma has posted a question for you. Why Indian governments, irrespective of political parties, want to deregulate everything? Why government hedges against their responsibility? Aren't our government inefficient? Why do these government need private players to promote competition? Can't government intervention treat the systematic disease?
No, I think the system was already flawed. Are we to understand that the condition of farmers during regulation was right and perfect, that we don't need reforms? Are we to understand that our farmers were so self-sufficient that we didn't need reforms? Are we to understand that there was no need for private players, which essentially helps the farmers earn more? So it's not that, for any sector to thrive, you need more players, right? That is how you generate wealth. And for a long time, Shaunak ji has said, the state had the monopoly, right? The state could decide what to do, where to do. A farmer could not sell intra-state. He was told, go to this mandi, sell at this price, and that's it. But now that's no longer the case. If I'm from Gujarat and I'm a farmer, I can go to Rajasthan and do it, right? I can do the contract farming. I need not even go to Rajasthan for that matter. So there is need for deregulation. We live in a globalized world. We have to compete with international markets, and if we are to reach this goal or aim of Atmanirbhar or self-sufficiency or self-reliance, then we need more private players to ensure wealth generation. I hope that answers the question, Priyanka.
Yes, sir. The next question is from Utkarsh Goyal and it's directed towards Shaunak sir. Can we not have cooperative societies in agriculture like we have the Amul producing, like we have in Amul producing, milk producing sectors? Sorry.
So the farmer producers organization that I talked about is like a cooperative. And as far as agriculture is concerned, there are as far as the sugarcane is concerned, there are sugarcane cooperatives. Especially in Maharashtra, there's a large number of sugarcane cooperatives. So it's not the case that cooperatives don't exist in the agriculture sector, but we need to promote them even more. We need to build more farmer producer organization, so they have a better they are at a better position in order to negotiate deals with the private sector. And a farmer producer organization also has a lot of other benefits. So it will give you a financial benefit, it will give you technology, it will give you the much needed information. And uh, so the, so that we therefore we need to have more cooperatives in the sector. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Now the next question is from Saren. It's for Ajay sir. Even if there is somewhat probability that the farmers dealing directly with the corporation or private players get lured with lucrative offers initially, but do not have upper hand in negotiation on later stage, in light of manipulative tactics by such MNCs and corporations, why the constructive mechanism to keep vigilance over this hasn't been introduced hand in hand with the structural changes. So,
Thank you for your question, Sorin. I think we've been trained, or perhaps it is in our subconscious mind, to imagine a farmer as helpless, as poor. हमें लगता है कि क्या दयनीय स्थिति में रहते हैं, which might be true in many cases, but it doesn't work that way, that you could easily manipulate the farmers. You can't manipulate the farmers. I mean, let us understand this. This is new India. We are in the 21st century. You can't manipulate any section of the society, let alone farmers. Farmers would be the last person who would get manipulated by anything. And what this does is, these reforms, like I said, it helps in wealth generation. That is the need of the hour, right? We're looking at a 5 trillion economy. We're looking to be an economic military superpower. So we can't perhaps ask these questions which are so defensive in nature कि गरीब किसान है, इसके साथ क्या होगा. ऐसे नहीं होता है. किसान बहुत समझदार है, किसान बहुत बुद्धिमान है. बहुत बुद्धिमान किसान पंजाब से दिल्ली भी आ गए हैं प्रोटेस्ट करने. आई एम श्योर कि द गवर्नमेंट विल फाइंड अ वे टू end this protest peacefully, which will happen in perhaps a couple of days. So it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. The farmers are very, very smart. They know how to deal with things, and we have essentially opened the market for them. So the one thing that we should be asking is, by
Yes, sir. We'll be taking our last question now. And the last question is for Shaunak, sir. Uh, don't you think that it's from Karan Sharma? Don't you think that saying ending of mandis is less likely to happen, a little speculative? The farmers cannot risk their lives just on a reassurance that it is less likely to happen. Why can't the government give the same in writing? Can we rely just on words of the government?
You see, as far as the mandi, APMC mandis are concerned, when I said that they are less likely to vanish or deteriorate, I was assuming that once private investment comes in, the mandis will also have to mend their ways, provide better facilities, and stop exploiting farmers in order to stay relevant. And even if the mandis were, say, which is like not going to happen, if they were to vanish, the private players and the government as well can buy directly for the farmers. So the MSP, as we have been made to believe, is not really dependent on the mandi system. So I think what is more likely to happen is that the mandis will implement the Model APMC Act that was brought about in 2003, subsequently 2007 and 2017. And whenever there is competition in the market, in order to stay relevant and in order to exist, you have to provide better services. So the mandis will have to provide better services to the farmers as well as to the traders. And if they do not, then the private players will take in. And at that point, and this is my honest opinion, if the government if government keeps on spending money subsidizing these mandis who are not ready to mend their ways, who are who are involved in a lot of corruption, then the government is not following an appropriate economic model. Yeah. Yeah, Priyanka, to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So here we have come to the end of this session. Hope you all found the session informative and your doubts got cleared regarding the Farmers Bill. I would like to thank both our speakers, Mr. Ajay Kashyap and Mr. Shaunak Kotekar, Ganesh ji, and all the participants for joining the meeting on such a short notice. So I'll be ending the meeting now. You guys may leave.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, Anshulji. Thank you, Shaunakji and Ganeshji. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.